Okay, I think we're going to begin. Hello and welcome to How to Balance Personalization and Privacy for Competitive Advantage. I'm Jen Decker, and I'll be your host today. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we are recording this webinar and that we will make it available on our website as well as our YouTube channel. In addition, if you have any questions, we encourage you to use the question panel. And at the end of this webinar, we'll have a brief Q&A session. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenter from the Smart Panda Labs team, Managing Director, Shamir Duverseau. Welcome, Shamir.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Jen.
Yeah. So let's start with setting the stage for today's chat. What would you say is more important, personalization or data privacy?
I always say to kind of lean in the direction of the person, the consumer, the customer. And so it's really about data privacy, right? It's about respecting the boundaries that exist. And we all know there's been so much news these past few years about data privacy, so much that companies like Apple are doing to respect people's privacy in terms of their data. So I think definitely if there's ever a debate and a choice of kind of writing that fine line between one and the other, always err on the side of privacy. Always err on the side of respecting the customer. That way, companies are really showing they're respecting that relationship with the customer. They're valuing that relationship, and that's going to kind of earn more loyalty in the long term with that particular customer or prospect. And that's what's going to take the lead. But as I know we're going to talk about more, if it's done right, we can accomplish good personalization without crossing that line, that boundary into data privacy.
Okay. Given everything you just shared, how do you align personalization and data privacy efforts?
That's kind of the crux of today's conversation, right? That's kind of the paradox. Just so many people in the market are saying that personalization is very important to them, that they expect brands and companies to deliver these personalized experiences. And at the same time, they say that privacy is very important to them, right? And they don't want these companies invading their privacy. So I think it's really about kind of understanding the context of each one, right? When are we going to try to deliver a personalized experience? And then what kind of data are we going to use to deliver that personalized experience? How is that data sourced, right? So the more explicit the action that the customer has with you, whether it's explicit in terms of where they're getting the personalized experience, so on the website versus an ad, explicit in terms of how that data was sourced. So whether they're explicitly giving you the information versus perhaps using third-party data or information, the more you're going to be able to say, okay, this is an appropriate way to, or appropriate time or experience to deliver personalization. On the contrary, on the other end of the spectrum, when that information isn't being given as explicitly, when that interaction, that experience isn't as explicit, then that's when you're kind of leaning into the side of privacy. And it's not necessarily that a company or organization is using anything that's really inappropriate or private. It's more about the perception that what they're doing is inappropriate or private or has gone too far. So really alignment becomes what are the experiences and what data is being used and how is that data being sourced? And again, the more explicit it is, the better off you are. The more it gets away from being explicit from a customer standpoint, that customer-centric model, then the more dangerous it gets. And of course, certain things are always off limit, right? Like PII, you don't want to use personally identifiable information in those kind of general marketing messages or general marketing personalization efforts. But aside from that, I think that's really the kind of dividing line there.
Okay. So let's talk a little more about personalization. How do you know what to personalize?
It's about ultimately what's going to make that person's experience better. And I think that's really driven by what that person, what that prospect, what that customer perceives is going to make the experience better. And if that's the primary driver, then kind of saying, okay, great. How does that align with my business goals and my company's goals? If you flip that around, I think that's when you get in trouble. If you're trying to say, well, this is what's going to accomplish most for me as an organization or business, then you might begin to cross that line because you're being driven more by the bottom line than you are by respecting the customer. And that kind of goes back to that first question you asked, right? About making sure that those two things are being balanced and you're not crossing that line. So really, if you keep the customer first, that's going to help to drive that experience. So for example, if a customer is shopping on a website, They're giving you information as they're shopping, perhaps via the search filters. Perhaps you have like a little quiz or something, or an assessment that's going to help them make a decision. Well, now they're overtly, explicitly giving you information. And now from that point forward, if you begin to personalize search results or personalized products, well, that's an expectation the customer has, is saying, I'm giving you this so that you can filter down your product catalog of 500 things to the 50 things that are most relevant to me based on what I'm explicitly telling you. So as you get into those experiences and it serves the purpose of the customer first and foremost, that's going to help. And of course, that aligns with business goals, right? Because now the business is in a position to say, okay, these are the 50 products you're most likely going to convert on. And these are the things you're most likely going to buy. And of course, that's what the business wants to show you anyway. So as long as the customer is taking the lead and it's a customer-centric model of what matters most to them and their experience, then that ultimately is what's going to drive things.
Great, great. So let's get a little more specific. Should someone be thinking about personalizing promotions?
That's always a difficult one. So I think let's talk about that right for a second, and let's answer that question in a couple of different ways. So I think first, on a high level, it does make sense to personalize promotions, but now you have to say, okay, well, why would we consider doing that, and where would we consider doing that, right? So the first is kind of the why would we consider doing that. So there's a number of different reasons to customize promotions. Maybe you see a certain segment of your audience needs more help in terms of converting, so you feel like a promotion is going to be more valuable to them. Perhaps you're seeing that you feel like you need to personalize promotions because of the type of customer they are. So maybe they've shown greater customer loyalty, or maybe they're not yet a customer at all versus someone who has bought in the past, and you feel like you want to personalize promotions for them. So that why really matters, because now it allows you to give that promotion some context. I think it becomes dangerous when the promotion doesn't have enough context, because between different devices and people are experiencing your particular digital experience as a company, you can on one device see a promotion and another device not see that same promotion, depending on how it's being personalized to you. And now you're kind of getting yourself in trouble, so to speak, because it's like, well, why am I seeing it here and I'm not seeing it there? And you kind of get confused as to what's going on. So I think if you consider the why first, and you kind of consider the context of what you're doing, because you're a previous customer, we are giving you this promotion, right? And now all of a sudden, if you're on one device and you're logged in, or that's the device you made the purchase before, okay, well, this device knows that you're a previous customer, whereas in this device, your mobile device, you're not logged in. They don't know who you are. So there's no reason for them to give you the promotion, because it's like, I don't know you're a returning customer, right? So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so that you can see how that rationale kind of begins to kind of say, well, as long as there's a why for it, as a customer, I can begin to explain it. So I think that's part of the why. I think the other thing we said we were going to talk about was the where, right? So with the where, again, experiences are omni-channel. So you're talking about making sure that if you're going to personalize something like a promotion, is that going to happen on the website? Is that going to happen perhaps in an email communication or an SMS communication? And understanding the channels available to you also help a lot, because again, you're trying to eliminate that potential confusion that can come. We talked about the desktop experience versus the mobile experience.
Yeah.
Well, you can eliminate that a lot by using a communication channel like an email or an SMS, right? Because I know I'm sending a text to Jen, and I know Jen is a previous customer, and therefore I'm giving Jen this, this personalized promotion because of her history of buying with me. And now you're getting this in this one medium. And in order to take advantage of this promotion, you got to click on this particular link, which will take you to the website on whatever device you're on, and then taking advantage of that. So I think also thinking about the where and the omni-channel of it will also help kind of say, okay, should we personalize the promotion? And if so, where should we do so in a way that's going to really protect that customer experience above all?
Kind of that customer journey, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So what about like the pricing? Like, can you personalize that?
Yeah, so that one, similar vein, right? But I think significantly trickier when it comes to personalizing pricing. But at the same note, a lot of companies are doing that. I know, Jen, you and I were talking earlier about optimization teams and how optimization teams are starting to involve product people a lot more often, right?
Yes.
and they're injecting pricing into that model of saying, well, how do we make our pricing a lot more dynamic than it has been? And we see that in a lot of industries. The airline industry is notable for its dynamic pricing, right? But now people are trying to say, well, how do we personalize pricing in order to help drive better conversions and what we know, again, using that data model about that person, but again, without crossing the line into data privacy to say, how do we do that? So with everything that we've talked about and anything we want to think about doing from a personalization standpoint, experimentation is going to be a key element of that, of saying, okay, we feel like we want to create this personalized experience. We want to create this personalized price. Let's test it and let's see how that works. And perhaps you're not testing on a particular, on your entire audience, but just on a cohort or a small sample size of that audience to kind of see what the overall effect is of testing something like pricing, which can be very tricky too, because now you're not just talking about, okay, should we test pricing? Who are we going to test pricing on? But now there's that capability question. Testing pricing can be a lot more complicated from a testing standpoint. So having the right kind of tool to be able to affect that is going to be key too. So SiteSpect being a great example of a tool that allows you to be able to control the experience to a degree where testing pricing can happen in a relatively easy way, where other tools that can become significantly more complicated. If you have a tool and you're simply just loading JavaScript and there's Flickr involved, and all of a sudden a person sees one price and then for half a second they see another price, and it's like, what just happened? Why did that price just go up on me? Just
right
by flicking the screen, right? That's going to be a problem, right? So technology becomes a key part of that as well, in terms of making sure you have the right technology, like a SiteSpect or a tool similar, to be able to deliver that kind of experience.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, that was a great discussion, Shamir. Now we're going to move on to our Q&A portion, unless you have anything else you want to add. Was there anything that we didn't cover?
No, I think, we wanted to keep it short and sweet. We wanted to share a few quick tips. We didn't want to take up too much of people's time, but we wanted to share a few quick tips about the importance of balancing those two things and making sure that we're doing privacy in the right way, making sure that the customer and their experience is what's going to lead the way and really drive things forward. And we figure, if you can do that, then we can certainly accomplish a lot. So I think that was a good way to summarize it. And yeah, I'm happy to see what questions people might have.
Yeah. If you haven't done so yet, we encourage you to take advantage of the question panel, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can. Okay, there's a few coming through. Shamir, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah. So I'm seeing one about who's responsible in the organization for kind of making those final decisions about personalization versus privacy, and who's crossing that line. We alluded to it earlier, having kind of that central optimization team is critical. Some organizations don't have that. Maybe they have a center of excellence, or maybe they have one person that kind of owns that. Some organizations use agencies like ours to manage that experimentation and personalization program and that experience. But whether it's one person, a team, or a third-party agency, there definitely needs to be an owner in the organization. There needs to be someone who's kind of take responsibility and accountability for making those decisions. And that owner, or that, whether that group, that person, that agency, needs to make sure that they're in a position to say, I'm communicating with all the right groups in the organization to do that. So of course, there's marketing. Of course, there's going to be analytics. Often it's going to involve product to some degree as well. And because we're talking about personalization, legal is also going to be an aspect of that as well, especially if you're in an industry that's more highly regulated when it comes to that kind of thing. Healthcare comes in mind, right? So legal is involved with there, so you're not violating any privacy policies around customer data, patient data, right? Or the kind of data that you're capturing and using on the website. Unfortunately, I know that can sometimes be very hard to do, but making sure legal is involved as well in terms of making those proper decisions is going to be key in answering that question about who's responsible. But there needs to be some owner, right? There needs to be that final person that's going to kind of drive that. But that person needs to be taking input from all those other groups, that team or that agency needs to be taking input from that other groups. But ultimately, there needs to be some owner in the organization who's going to make the final call.
Okay, great. Looks like we have one other one. How would a company who's new to optimization and personalization, how would they get started?
Well, one of the things I think that's really important is to very quickly kind of outline what the goals are of getting started with that, right? So if what are those business goals? that the organization ultimately has, and then boiling that down and saying, okay, how does what we're doing digitally, how does that digital experience, how does that tie to those business goals? And that's going to help give you a sense of kind of what those primary KPIs are, right? That are going to start that optimization program. Then it becomes data, right? That's kind of step 2 of saying, okay, well, what does the data show are the barriers or the potential barriers to being able to drive those KPIs and move those metrics in the right direction. And from that analysis, it's going to come the ideas, which is kind of step 3. And then after that, what you fundamentally is a process. Now you've got your basis for saying, okay, this is how we're generating ideas for doing things that we feel like are going to be impactful in moving forward the business goals. Now we need some process, some structure in place to begin to say, how do we move those ideas through a process of saying, this is exactly what we're going to test, or this is the experience that we want to personalize. How do we validate that? Make sure that we're not crossing any lines, again, when it comes to a privacy standpoint. How do we begin to build that? How are we going to measure this? How are we going to run it? How are we going to analyze it at the end? So then it's really about process. And again, that's going to be extremely hard if there isn't an owner in the organization to do that. But oftentimes, even if there is an owner, there's a bandwidth issue, right? They just don't have enough time to do that. Or perhaps there's a bottleneck in the bandwidth in terms of, okay, well, IT or the development team doesn't have enough bandwidth to be able to work with them to help me build out these experiments, or
right.
Or the analytics team doesn't have that bandwidth. So again, a lot of people are either hiring and bringing in a team, or they're hiring an external agency to help bring in and say, hey, you guys can give me the bandwidth I need to begin running this experimentation program, to bring that rigor, to bring that process, to start the ideation and to get me up and running.
Very good. Cool. Well, awesome. So seeing there are no more questions, we are coming up on our stop time. I want to thank Shamir for chatting with us today. Hopefully everyone has some good takeaways. We thank you all for joining us. And if you want more information about SiteSpect or Smart Panda Labs, we do encourage you to check out our websites. This concludes our webinar. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shamir.